essence of what we do is a philosophy of discipline.
A force of one. A blue steel force that beats out the bad guys' guns and knives. A force of one. He's got to make his next shot his best shot.
Hello everybody, welcome back to Screenstars. I'm here today to bring you my review for the 1979 martial arts action film, A Force of One. The film is directed by Paul Aaron and it stars Chuck Norris and Jennifer O'Neill. Now the film focuses on a group of police officers, police detectives, and they are being targeted and killed and murdered by a martial artist. So they ask Chuck Norris's character, Matt Logan, who is a kickboxing champion, to help them, to train the officers so that they're more prepared to try and defend themselves. But the Matt Logan character gets more and more involved. He gets more of a connection with the head detective, played by Jennifer O'Neill. And it turns out that while this might be somewhat of a distraction because he's training for a championship match, the killer may be somebody more connected to him than he first realised. Right. What are my thoughts on A Force of One? Well, this is another of my Chuck Norris reviews, and if you don't know, I reviewed a bunch of Chuck Norris films about 12 months ago, with the end goal really is to try and get up a top 10 list of my favourite Chuck Norris movies. Now, I've always been a fan of Chuck Norris, but I've not really had like an encyclopedic knowledge or anything of his movies, and I needed to rewatch a lot of them to remind me of them. And this is one that I wasn't sure if I'd seen before, and after watching it I can confirm I haven't seen this one before. So this was a completely new watch for me, this one, A Force of One. And while there are quite a few elements of this film that lower the quality of it, and bearing in mind this is 1979, and Chuck Norris isn't even like the main headline star in this film, it's actually Jennifer O'Neill. There's also quite a lot to recommend here about this film. I actually didn't mind this one too much at all, if you can kind of put some of the things that drag it down to one side. As usual here, the martial arts in the film is top notch, and the fights I think in this film were choreographed by Chuck Norris and his brother Aaron Norris, I believe it is. And you can tell there's a real sense of authenticity to the kickboxing and the martial arts in this film. And you do get some extended scenes of Chuck Norris like in a ring doing kickboxing, whereas other movies probably would have not had as long a cut sort of thing. You get to see, longer clips of like the kickboxing in rings and stuff like that, and see some really impressive moves. And then the stuff out of the ring again is well shot, well choreographed. You do see quite a lot of it, and Chuck Norris comes across as a real badass in this film in regards to his kickboxing. He does in pretty much all his films, but some of them, especially when it's people choreographing the fights that don't really understand how to put fights on screen, they don't always show the best of Chuck Norris. Well, this one absolutely does, and you get the impression from watching this that he's absolutely totally skilled in martial arts and kickboxing. Beyond that, there's not many layers to his character, but you could argue that about many of Chuck Norris's characters. This was reasonably early in his acting career, and even late into his acting career, no one would ever argue that Chuck Norris was a strong actor. But there are some poor performances in this film. Some of the cops, if you like, and I think some of the issue was not just the acting with some of the people playing the cops. they just didn't play convincing cops at all. I didn't buy any of them as cops, other than Jennifer O'Neill, who she kind of, because she spent more time with her than the others. Her character kind of grows on you a little bit, and you know she's the only real believable one. And there's some of the police station scenes are overly long, very heavily full of dialogue. And when you're giving people that aren't great at delivering lines or good at acting, you know, long dialogue scenes, it takes you out of the movie. It just doesn't work. And some of the dialogue here is really poor. Obviously, it's not been read over and checked over by anyone that knows what they're talking about, because there's a scene in the film. One of the first scenes you see is like two cops being killed by this masked martial artist. And then you've got like the coroner, if you like, speaking to like the chief at the police station with the other detectives, you know, talking about how he was killed and stuff. And then he comes out with a comment that, you know, he's strangled in his own blood. I think you mean drowned in his own blood. So, I mean, you know, nobody thought to refilm that and say, no, it should be drowned in his blood. You know, it's strangled in his blood. And they kind of leave that stuff in. So it just kind of just takes away some of the immersion. But beyond that, other than, you know, like I say, some overly long dialogue scenes, some fairly uninteresting characters, the general plot and idea of this film, that there's a martial artist going round and like murdering police officers, is pretty solid and a pretty decent idea. And the fact that, you know, they have to bring like Chuck Norris's character on board to try and give them a little bit of inside knowledge of, you know, how this person is able to do what they're doing and to train some of these officers. There are some bones here of a very, very good idea. Does it deliver effectively all the time? Absolutely not, no. And again, you do have to bear in mind this is a 1979 movie, as I've already mentioned. You know, there's probably Starsky and Hutch episodes that were far more convincing as like, you know, police detective stories. You just don't buy the police aspect of this, you know. It just doesn't necessarily work. You've got these police creeping around in warehouses getting stalked by a martial artist. You don't necessarily understand why they're in this warehouse to start with. And it just doesn't always make a great deal of sense. So the stuff in between, like the fight scenes and all that kind of stuff, very typical of a lot of Chuck Norris films and martial arts films in general, doesn't always particularly work. But the rest of it, I think you can't really fault. You know, the strong martial arts, the really good fight choreography that we get here. And you know that the attempt at giving us like a gritty cop drama is appreciated, even if it doesn't always necessarily pay off. And the fact that, you know, I think they kind of miss a trick as well, because there's a point in this film where it becomes very personal for Chuck Norris. When someone he cares about very, very dearly is killed by this masked martial artist. So it becomes a revenge mission for him. And I think the payoff at the end just doesn't necessarily... I wanted it to be a bigger or a longer fight sort of thing in regards to the payoff. So, yeah. Excuse me if I'm sounding a bit croaky, guys. I've got a bit of a chest infection, so that's why I'm sounding like I'm smoking 40 a day. Yeah, so I did quite enjoy this one. I did think it was pretty decent. Not up there, I don't think, with his best, but I really did enjoy the fight scenes in this one, and the general concept and the idea behind it certainly worked mostly. So thanks for watching, guys. Don't forget to call back for more Chuck Norris reviews, as well as many other reviews and content on the channel very, very soon.